right, welcome back to Light the Fuse. We're lighting fuses again. Charles Hood, how you doing?
Wow, a new intro.
Yeah, just give us a
real
energy.
excited.
Yeah,
I like it. Okay, cool.
Yes, we got part 2 of our epic visual effects marathon.
Yes. Back with Stu Maschwitz.
Who's awesome.
Yeah.
We love Stu, and this is a great chat, great continuation of a chat. Do we have anything to go through? You have any news or anything you want to talk about? Or
Well, I just wanted to say that we have an update with Lauren Balfe.
Okay.
He tweeted again that he's still thinking about it.
About adopting us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he does listen to the show.
Yeah. That really blew Carly's mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, he listened to the episode that Carly was on.
Yeah.
Carly Wiesel. And, that's awesome. We love Lauren, and it's so cool that he listens.
Yeah. People were very into Carly's episodes. So
really?
So we're going to have her back.
Oh, okay.
Well, just judging by the Patreon. Just from the Patreon. Everybody was wanting to talk about these theme park attractions. So
yeah. That was really fun.
Yeah, we'll have to get her back. When there's a new dump of information, or maybe non-information, because it's very possible neither of these parks will ever open.
It sounds like maybe South Korea will.
Maybe South Korea will, yes.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Because we will be there.
We'll be there. Start saving now. Remember to contribute to that Patreon. We'll get us to South Korea.
Yes, please. Patreon.com/lightthefuse. Check out our Patreon. We got lots of bonus content, lots and lots. Our commentaries, bonus interviews, all kinds of good stuff.
Do you have anything to tease in this episode? Because you've heard it and I haven't.
I mean, you were there.
I was there, yeah.
No, nothing really. We just got to talk about a lot of good stuff.
Okay. I love this conversation. I hope you guys love it, too.
Yeah, and we'll be back afterwards.
Okay.
So did you work at all with Rob Bottin? I mean, he's like this sort of reclusive character now that has not really worked. I think maybe he works in commercials sometimes, but just curious if you worked with him at all on this. I know it seemed like it was all a collaboration with ILM to do the mask work.
Yeah, I mean, if I had been on the set, then yeah, that would have been a highlight for me because I'm such a huge fan of his work. You know, RoboCop and The Thing, and I mean, you know, he's the guy, right? But like, but yeah, I didn't get to work with him personally. The interesting thing to me, kind of as a fan of films in general and the series, is just that this kind of combo approach of like sometimes putting Tom Cruise in actual makeup versus having it be another actor or whatever, like all of those things, I think they were kind of staking out territory that the series would kind of ultimately develop more kind of regimented opinions about, you know. But yeah, I mean, it was the idea that you would go into a movie about rubber masks without having someone like him involved at the time. It just wouldn't even have been a thing, you know. The seeing the plate, you know, kind of the B plate of Tom Cruise wearing a Jon Voight mask and like that had been carefully, you know, nudged into position to match as close as possible to the actual Jon Voight sitting there is pretty creepy, you know, because it's like, you know, a very, very, very realistic looking Jon Voight with like terrible, awful kind of eye sockets and Tom Cruise's eyes like shadowed behind them. You know, it's like, this is not something you really want to look at for too long.
And what are the elements there that you're working with? Is it just two shots? I mean, is it just Tom Cruise with a mask and then Jon Voight, or is there another shot you're blending in there as well, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's those two things and a clean plate for the background, and I'm pretty sure that's it. The main thing was just like, you know, Jon Voight would kind of reach for. They may have had like a little bit of practical kind of a prosthetic kind of neck piece for John to grab and begin to pull. But of course, what winds up happening is it's Tom Cruise's hand from the beginning, you know, so it's Tom Cruise, right. You know, we wind up compositing Tom Cruise's hand kind of over the shot from the beginning, which means that inevitably there was probably some part where the hands didn't line up perfectly, so there was probably a big job of actually painting out Jon Voight's hand. But yeah, that's basically the gag, and then I think Knoll probably came up with the the choreography bit of kind of stretching the mask a little bit, to one side before pulling it to the other, which winds up being like, I remember watching that and thinking like, gosh, whoever choreographed this, it's like they went to animation school, right? Because anticipation of motion, it's like you don't just pull the mask off, you push and then you pull. And that what winds up happening is you get this glorious moment where you see Jon Voight's face kind of peel across, it just could so easily they could have so easily chosen a more conservative way to do it, but it gives you this horrifying moment of like, oh, whoa, what's happening? Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like the first movie really did that more than the other ones, where the face sort of pulled off a little bit more, and then you pull out and then off. And I always assumed it was Rob Bottin. It's interesting to hear that it was actually John Knoll who had that.
I actually don't know. I never asked John about it. That was just a private thought of like, this choreography is cool, and that's so much of like.
Well, and it adds a place that you can put the morph in too, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like that pause. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I kind of think it was John, because I have a feeling John was like sitting on that set going, like, he's very much a dot your I's, cross your T's kind of guy. And he would be doing everything possible to kind of set himself up for success and give him a lot of places to kind of hide those transitions, So getting the mask immediately like not a face, and getting it into this sort of stretchy form, I think allows the morph to happen kind of sooner than you think it does, and it becomes a bit of that like best kind of visual effects where it's more sleight of hand than it is just brute force,
Yeah. Oh, and the shot at the end is, with Jon Voight on the train, if I recall correctly, I don't think is moving. But the one at the beginning is like this very energetic push-in to like reveal Tom Cruise as this big hero shot that's amazing. So I assume this VistaVision camera, which I assume that camera's pretty big, is on some kind of motion control rig or something so that you can replicate that move, or how does that work in the case of the first shot of the mask reveal?
That's a great question. I don't remember. As we're talking, maybe I'll look at the shot here and see if I could give you an educated guess, but I actually don't think it would have been. On set live motion control was a pretty big undertaking at the time, and it's not that it wouldn't have been possible, but I also kind of think maybe the move might be mostly done by the time. Let's see here.
And is that one have another actor? Because the case of the Jon Voight one, you have Jon Voight, and then you have Jon Voight morphing into Tom Cruise. In the opening scene, it's this guy who is Tom Cruise with makeup on. So was it just? How did that work? I mean, was it just Tom Cruise with makeup on and then Tom Cruise?
Yeah, exactly.
There wasn't another actor involved in that.
No. So yeah, it's Tom Cruise both ways. I think it's more just the issue of getting the mask off. Trying to pull it up here, but I'm having troubles. Yeah, I don't know. I that one I had nothing to do with, so I probably shouldn't try to make up an answer on the spot.
That's okay. Drew, do you have any other questions about Mission Impossible, or should we ask him about other stuff?
Well, the one thing I wanted to know, did you guys make dummies for the model helicopter? Because there's a shot of it crashing that could be a like dummy Jean Reno / Jon Voight, or what went into that?
So there's a very specific shot kind of showing Jon Voight getting kind of ground up under the skid of the helicopter that was done with a live plate of Jon Voight or his double, I can't remember which, that was kind of composited in with our. I can't remember that's an interesting shot. That shot does stand out because it feels like it's a very Brian De Palma kind of horror film kind of, you definitely want to really enjoy seeing the bad guy get, mushed,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's a composite. I can't remember if it's a CG helicopter or they may have been able to get that bit of it practically with the miniature helicopter and then just composite him into it. But yeah, there were dummies though on the miniature helicopter. Yes, there were like little, in fact that may have determined it may have been kind of like a GI Joe sized, like Barbie doll kind of scale to so that certain aspects of that stuff could actually be sourced. They also had a helicopter buck built so they could put Jean Reno in the helicopter flying. So there were these VistaVision plates of Jean Reno just performing the flying thing, which was a task that I don't think he was particularly excited about, like showing up that day and like sitting on a helicopter chair in front of a blue screen for hours at a time, just twiddling the controls. Because I remember looking at those plates and thinking, he's not, this is probably not like his best performance in his entire career. But it didn't matter because we were just sticking him behind a reflective windshield and all that stuff. But he was then texture mapped onto just a card inside the helicopter. So that's how you get live action Jean Reno flying the CG helicopter.
Oh wow,
That's cool.
And if you're curious about that process at all, I could tell you a little bit more about kind of what it took to get that helicopter looking realistic, because that was a bit of a thing back then. It was there wasn't really such a thing as, aside from Terminator 2, like to have a highly reflective kind of mechanical object in a shot like that was actually not something ILM had done. So even things like getting the reflections on the helicopter, there were no like 360-degree cameras available at the time. So John Knoll figured out kind of a system of shooting in multiple directions off of a moving train to get the reflection environments. But then oftentimes there would be something very specific in the shot, like a tree going by or whatever, that you would want reflected in, and we would actually texture map that tree onto a card and fly it past the helicopter so it would reflect properly. It's kind of ridiculous, like how much of that stuff, again, it would be just kind of table stakes for any basic visual effects shot, but it was really dicey there for a while. We kept running takes of the CG helicopter. And, as we were working on this, I thought a lot about the movie True Lies, which had like an amazing kind of, for the Harrier jet sequence at the end, it's an amazing kind of collaboration between a full-size mock-up, miniatures shot, motion control, a little bit of CG, much less than you think, real plane hanging off the side of a building by a cable, and the only visual effects are removing the cable. We were doing kind of like the exact thing you're not supposed to do, which was every shot, one after the other, was all done using the exact same technique. So there was nowhere to hide, like there could be this cumulative sense of like, yeah, but are we really on a train? So we were really concerned about that. And there were just weeks where the helicopter was not looking good. And at some point, like I'm kind of embarrassed about how this all happened, but like at some point I remembered seeing in dailies that they had shot this live action footage of the Notar helicopter, and I just thought, I bet that's around somewhere. So I actually found it just seems like the most basic thing, right? Look at your reference. But for whatever reason, like that's not where we were at. Like everyone's head was in some other problem-solving space of like, can you even do, a 100-shot sequence for a movie that's all visual effects? And so I found one of John's air-to-air shots of the red Notar helicopter, and I just loaded that in as my background plate, and I just worked on the shaders and the lighting and the reflections until they matched. And the thing, again, to remember about how ludicrous the world was back then is it would take many, many hours to render one frame of this helicopter. So what you would do to work interactively is you would draw a tiny little box around the part that you wanted to render. So I'd spend all day looking at maybe like a 10 pixel tall by 100 pixel wide little rectangle of a slice of the helicopter and re-rendering that over and over again.
Oh God.
And so I have my slice of helicopter superimposed over the actual plate of the helicopter, and I just beat on that on kind of one glorious day until they matched. And then I hit go on the shot and went home. And the next day in dailies, I'm sitting there, or like in the morning, I'm kind of sipping on my coffee, waiting. And there's this weird kind of like buzz like in the room, and like the producers are all acting weird and whatever. And my supervisor comes up to me and goes, "Okay, they're calling you into dailies, and just play it cool, okay?" And and I was like, "Oh shit! Like I'm in trouble. What did I do?" And I walked into the room, and it was John, Knoll, and Joe Lettieri, and George Murphy, and everybody, and they all were just like stunned. They all stood up and they clapped and they pointed at the shot, and they're like, "This is what they all have to look like." So that was like,
Wow.
yeah, it was definitely like the single greatest moment of my career at that point at 22 years old or whatever.
Wow.
I was just like, okay, all right, I have something to contribute here. And from that moment on, they were like, okay, now do the same for the channel shot. And then, and so I did that. I matched the lighting, and we got the channel shot working. And then so then they were like, okay, tough guy, take on this shot, the shot of the helicopter actually flying into the channel, which I spent probably a month and a half on, animating it, lighting it, compositing in like the little live action element of the spark as the thing hits, working with Paul Houston, who did the sort of digital map painting on that, projecting that onto geometry, which that was, I was just absolutely in heaven on that shot. Like it required so much of what I had just learned how to do, and I was just absolutely loving it. Like the choreography of it, the animation of it. I think I may have been I can't remember where the idea came from to have the rotor hit, but I think that came out of conversations between John and me, and it was like, do we have a little spark element? And it may have been one of those things where John's like, let's just go shoot one, and then suddenly we had a spark element.
Oh, you're talking about that spark that hits like right when the helicopter enters the channel?
Yeah, and kind of like the last few frames of the shot are just
spark.
Like little streaky sparks going by. Yeah,
Like right in
that
the
was
lens
all kind
almost.
of,
That's awesome.
yeah. That came out of the process of doing all that. You know, like that was not in the storyboard, that little spark. You know, that was like kind of emerged organically out of that process. It's just I love thinking back to it. I mean, it certainly was an important moment in my career where I kind of realized like, oh, I'm starting to figure out what I know how to do and what I don't in this field, and then the other thing is just thinking back of like, you know, the shot I animated of the helicopter behind John Voight as he's like fiddling with the cable. Well, we just hand animated that cable. Like the cable was just a spline with some control points on it, and it was like, you know, I guess I have my animation degree for something here. I'm sitting here just moving spline points and just animating this flapping cable, and it was like, you know, today that would all be done with a simulation, and you know, there'd be repeatable takes and whatever. But back then, it was almost like, you know, like a Phil Tippett stop motion kind of a thing, where it's like if you get a take that's good, you kind of hold on to it because doing more work on it could actually make it worse. You know,
Right.
So it definitely. Looking back, I kind of realized that a lot of what we were doing, even though we were doing it with computers, had more to do with kind of the history of ILM's kind of practical and kind of like hands-on animation roots than maybe things do today, where everything's much better, but everything is much more kind of procedural and much more, let's refine it until we get, you know, the exact perfect take. Back then, it was a little more seat of the pants.
I actually realized I have one more question. Sorry, Drew.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask you quickly about the opening shot of the train sequence and what went into that.
Yeah.
It's you know, it's a wide of the train on the tracks, and then the camera pushes in closer and closer and closer until we actually end up in the window looking at John Voight's hands. You know, what were the different elements that were needed to put that together? Is the train not actually on the tracks for that shot?
Yeah, so there's no the only TGV train cars that you see in the film are a full-size set that they built for the interior, a full-size exterior that was shot on the blue screen stage for all of the stunt work, and then CG. So what you're seeing there is a helicopter shot plate in Scotland of empty train tracks pushing towards the tracks as close as they could get. And then CG train on it. And by the way, that CG train there was no kind of like rigging solution for putting a train on tracks. It was just, forward kinematic, train cars, hand animated in a shot, by the way, that is hand match moved. So this was before you could just throw a shot like that at, software like Synthesize or whatever and have it automatically track the background. Those shots would all be, there would be rigorous measurements taken to whatever degree possible about the set, which in this case would be not much, right? And then ILM's match moving department would hand animate a camera to line up as best they could. And of course, it was incredibly unforgiving because the train actually has to stick to the tracks. So absolute, like, just brute force by hand matching of the camera for that shot, animating and matching the train onto it, and then the very, very difficult task of seamlessly transitioning from the CG train into the live action photography. And I think they may have allowed themselves maybe like a tree blurring by on one frame or something to kind of help with the transition. The other thing that I would note is that right before the shot kind of finishes pushing in and you start focusing on the business of, kind of pulling the boombox apart and turning it into a gun, there's a person visible sitting in the train car kind of reading a newspaper off to the frame left, and that is John Knoll, who frequently makes a digital, kind of Hitchcockian appearance in his own visual effects work.
Oh, wow.
Because he had a 3D scan of his head. So he is the pilot of the X-Wings in the Star Wars Special Edition, which of course he was doing like on his laptop while we were working on this movie. And that's, by the way, what I meant about how I was looking into my future when I saw that CG helicopter, because in between, or if I had a question to go ask John, I would like go up to his office to ask him about helicopters, and he'd be sitting there animating TIE fighters on his little beige Mac in Electric Image with After Effects, 2-point whatever, compositing shots together. And I was like, well, that's what I want to be doing. He's like, great, that's what you will be doing because we've got a Star Wars movie to make after this. So that was the birth of what became known as the Rebel Mac Unit at ILM, which was the group that I led for about 2 years there, working on Star Wars movies and Men in Black and Galaxy Quest and a bunch of other fun stuff. But, so that's, again, very important for me personally, very important project because it kind of set the course of my ILM career.
Well, and you reteamed with De Palma a couple of years later for an infamous project. We want to know everything you can tell us about the hurricane sequence, how far along you guys got. Everything about that we're fascinated by.
Yeah. Man, gosh.
This is Snake Eyes we're talking about now.
Yes.
Yeah, Snake Eyes. So, so I worked with Eric Brevig, who's a very talented visual effects supervisor on Men in Black. That was kind of the first non-John Knoll Rebel Mac project, and we did all the display screens for the big, egg-shaped display screen in Men in Black. And it was really cool and really fun. Got along great with Eric Brevig. And at the end of that project, there was kind of this little lull in work at ILM. And Eric was like, "Well, look, my next movie is going to be Snake Eyes, and we need a bunch of previs. And I wonder if you and a couple of your team would want to just kind of become animatic artists for a Brian De Palma movie." And I was like, I'm pretty sure I said yes 17 times before he even finished that sentence. Because, I went to film school, so of course Brian De Palma is my jam. Like, I think one of the reasons that I think, people have said that like the Mission Impossible franchise is sort of still kind of living in the shadow of that first film is that he has a style of making movies that is almost like to filmmaking what impressionist painting is to like everyone else is doing photorealism, right? Like I think about like the Langley sequence where, a drop of sweat does not drip down the outer surface of your glasses. Like that doesn't happen, right? But you don't question that for a second. And then he's hanging like a half an inch above the floor. And I love how long they hold on those shots of him like doing that weird wiggle move to like not touch the floor. It's like amazing, right? It's just amazing. And then the sweat drip, and then the hand comes out and catches it. That's not possible, right? Like, but he creates that reality in your mind. Like the movie cannot live in physical space. It can only live in your mind, right? And that's what he does. You know, like he's just like, fuck it, we're dollying through the wall. Like the movie lives in your mind, you know, does not live in physical space. And so I wanted a piece of that. Like I wanted to be a part of that process and to understand as a filmmaker, like how do you pre-visualize something like that? How do you have a plan for the audience kind of seeing, you know, the painting through the brushstrokes, right? And I will just, spoiler alert, I did not get that experience working on Snake Eyes. We were handed this very, very weird animatic that was made with some kind of like terrible sort of proto animatic making software that had these like little stick figure dudes in it, and it was like very rudimentary. I'm sure out of some effort to make things, you know, render quickly. Everything was just squares and boxes, and it was this crazy kind of puzzly choreography of like, we're in a tunnel, there's the door, people are outside the tunnel, the wave is coming, and then there's going to be this giant thing that's going to roll and it's going to shut the door and whatever. And Eric Brevig and I watched this animatic over and over again, and it was sort of like the Zapruder film. Like we were just like trying to figure out what was supposed to be happening because it was all like shot very weirdly. Like it was the everything that I thought, like where I thought, okay, me and Brian De Palma, we would totally get along because we totally care about things like not crossing the sagittal plane or breaking the 180-degree rule, like in lines of action and whatever, and like all this like sort of, you know, magical like mise en scène that happens. Like I was like, none of that is present in this animatic. Like I don't understand what's going on, and I'm sure it was just, I don't know, but I'm sure it was just like the process kind of ran away with him, or we were just seeing it too early, or whoever worked on him, you know, whatever sort of like, you know, ponytail guy was working on this animatic with him was like just kind of feeding him stuff, and he was like, yeah, we'll figure it out. But Eric Brevig and I were like, we got to figure this out. And so we started refining the animatics and like suggesting alternate takes and cutting it together at ILM, and long and involved process that I think got something that they felt like they could go and shoot. And then at the same time, again, Habib, it always comes down to Habib. There was basically one guy at ILM who could do really hard stuff, and that was Habib Zargapur. And like, he was working on figuring out how to have the wave hit the kind of Ferris wheel and stuff. And then I got busy with Star Wars, and then I went and saw the movie in the theater, and yeah.
Wait, so
I don't really know what happened in between there.
So wait, you didn't know the sequence was cut until you saw it in the theater?
That is correct.
Wow.
Holy cow.
Yeah, there is no hurricane or object. I forget what it was. It was like like the logo for a hotel or something.
Yeah, that's what that. Yeah, it was something. Yeah, but it was like
a giant ball that was rolling down or something.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. That stuff was all shot and cut together, and I think some of the visual effects were completed or close to it.
Yeah, there's even a line of dialogue at the end where Nick Cage says, I think back to us in that tunnel drowning, and it's like, wait, that didn't happen. What are you referring to? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, have you seen the De Palma documentary? Because they actually show footage of it.
Oh no, I haven't seen that. I must see that.
Yeah, they show some footage of that sequence. I don't think it's very high quality, but you get kind of it's sort of it's worth watching for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely need to see that. That's going to bring back some memories.
You also worked on The Host with that Bong Joon-ho directed. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I went to Seoul and I met with him and hung out on the set a bit, and then was kind of that was in my kind of like senior kind of artist days at the orphanage. So I would be kind of like guiding and overseeing that process, but Kevin Rafferty was our visual effects supervisor on that, working with our amazing orphanage crew on that. That was a glorious, awesome project. If you want a very short story on that, I'll just say that like we got the script and it was like Korean monster movie, obviously stew. So they handed it to me and I was like, what is this? And we started reading the script, me and the producer, and we were just like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't get it. What's going on? But my producer, Luca Byrne, who is now at Lucasfilm and has some pretty amazing credits, awesome guy. He hands me a DVD. He's like, just take this home and watch it. And it was Memories of Murder. And I took it home and watched it. And I was like, this guy is he's the next most important filmmaker. We are so lucky to be working with him.
Yeah.
He's David Fincher. He's like it, right?
Yeah.
So by the time I went to Seoul, I was like his biggest fan and had seen everything of his that I could, and I was just like, "Hey, buddy, we're gonna do the best we can to make your monster movie."
And wow, they lean heavily on you for that movie.
Well, that was the thing. He was like, he had this vision of this creature in broad daylight that he remembered kind of like dreaming about as a kid, driving under those bridges in Seoul, and it was and everything he wanted to do, we were like, yeah, man, people don't do that because it's hard, and we're gonna do it. And we threw the book at it. Like, we took it very, very seriously, and it's some of my absolute favorite work that we ever did at the orphanage. It was incredibly challenging, but so rewarding, and I love that movie, and I just love him to death. I mean, he is a modern genius.
Oh, for
yeah,
sure.
We
can't wait for the new one.
Yeah, we love him so much, and that movie is incredible. If anybody hasn't seen it, highly recommend you check out The Host from, I think it was like 2007. It's Bong Joon-ho.
Yeah.
Have to check it out. It's so good.
It's so good. His style is he's so inspirational. Like what he can do cinematically, his ability to kind of like mix dark and humor, and I don't know. It's unique. I think he's amazing.
Yeah, the way he balances tone, it's crazy how he can ping pong back and forth between. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and it was fun to be able to kind of play the role that I had on that, which is that having met him and worked with him just a tiny little bit on the set, and just eaten a lot of Korean food with him, and just talked about filmmaking, and just I feel very fortunate to consider him a friend. Like, my job then was to kind of come back to the orphanage and to like just talk to the crew and be like, guys, so here's the deal. Like, this movie's weird, but it's the good kind of weird that you're going to be glad that you were a part of. And so like, let's bring our A game to this. And boy, did folks ever do it. Like, that was, we did a lot of kind of crazy stuff on there. Like, we rendered, it was our first creature show, our first kind of muscular rigging show, our first trying to ray trace a shiny, wet, reflective creature who also had subsurface scattering. We rendered it using a kind of like little known render engine called Brazil. It was, every shot was all hands on deck. We nearly burned the building down that we were in from overheating our render servers. Like, it was a big show.
Wow. that was it. Part 2 of Stew.
Yes, and thank you to Kevin Blumenfeld for our legally dissimilar main theme, and then our legally very similar the plot theme.
Yeah. If we go to trial, though, that'll give us weeks of episodes. We'll run down all the.
We'll do live shows from court.
Yeah, and this show will just turn into a true crime podcast as we go to court.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's interesting. He mentioned Stu mentioned in the interview the John Knoll cameo. He said that John Knoll does a cameo, like what do you say, sort of like a CGI cameo in every one of his movies. He did it in the first Mission, but we didn't ask him. I don't even know if he knows because he didn't work on Ghost Protocol. But John Knoll must have a cameo in Ghost Protocol.
Oh yeah.
That now we need to keep an eye out for.
Maybe we'll reach out to Bird and see what if he knows, because I'm sure De Palma had no clue that John Knoll was possible.
Yeah. But we got to track down John Knoll, which we will work to do.
And then next week we'll have part 3. Close it up. He'll talk about some of his other work. He did the Blade Runner special edition.
Yes.
The Bong Joon-ho's The Host.
Really cool stuff that we talked to him about next week. Yeah. So stay tuned. Sign up for our Patreon, patreon.com/LightTheFuse. Thank you very much to all of you who sign up for our Patreon and help us. It really makes a big difference, and so it makes it possible to do this show. And this episode is brought to you by Jeremy Dillon, and a special thank you to Jacob from Holland for making it possible. So also, and the episode was mixed by Luke Burson, so thank you to Luke.
Yep, and remember to like, subscribe, rate, review wherever you're listening to this podcast. Go to tpublic.com if you want to get some t-shirts. Hopefully we'll have buttons or pins. We're unclear of what they are exactly, but hopefully they'll be up by the time this episode comes
TeePublic
up.
says they've got buttons now, or pins.
We don't know.
One or the other, but that sounds cool.
We'll make pins on our own at some point, but
yes.
Go to these, get some TeePublic pins.
Yes, buy a shirt. Someone bought the vinyl offer shirt a couple days
great.
ago. So it isn't a total bust. We've had a handful of buys.
We thought it was such a clever idea, and we were wrong.
We still haven't done our Ghost Protocol one that's very obscure, too.
Yeah.
We'll see how that one does. But I love it. I think it's so good. I'm definitely going to buy that one.
Okay, good. All right, we'll come back next week.
Not out yet, but maybe it will be by the time this episode airs. So we're working on it.
Part 3 next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod, and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcasts@gmail.com. If you'd like to watch the original Mission Impossible television show, all 7 seasons are currently available to stream on Amazon Prime. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.